All right, well, I think we're going to get going. It is time, so I am going to share my screen. And oh, of course, I have it at the end of it.
Of course.
All right, so okay, so I'll put it back up to the beginning here. All right, can everybody see it okay? I will put it in presenter mode here. All right, I think we're ready to rumble. So welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. Eric and I are super excited to just spend the next few minutes sharing our project that we've been working on for quite some time. Before we start, we do want you to know that this slide presentation and anything that we share will be fully available to you. If you have any questions along the way, stop us, ask a clarifying question or put it in the chat. And I am Linda Dornbos. I am an assistant professor of social studies at Oakland University. This is my 4th year there. I teach social studies methods and social studies content courses. Prior to being a professor, I was a classroom K-8 teacher for 28 years in various contexts and in different places across the United States. And it was at OU in my social studies content course that I met Erica. And she's one of those prize students that just stands out above many others and was willing to go above and beyond the expectations, which led us to this project.
Yes. Again, my name is Erica Murdock. I am a 2nd-year graduate student at OU with graduation just around the corner. I'm working on my master's of elementary education. Currently, I'm working as a long-term sub. I just finished up my student teaching. I have always had a love and passion for social studies, and I'm very thankful to be able to share that with you today.
So it was through Erica's work that I found a kindred spirit. For one of her assignments for class, she had designed a journey box for students that focused on issues of justice using the book January Sparrow by Patricia Polacco. So as co-learners and co-conspirators, we set out to expand on her journey box and to build this critical social inquiry that would involve students in understanding and doing the work of justice. So we set out to connect to the social studies standards. We used the C3 inquiry arc to build an inquiry of the cross-white incident that occurred in Marshall, Michigan in the mid-1800s. And today, with the rise of hate crimes and our democracy at risk, states seeking to limit what we can and cannot teach, we just feel a great sense of urgency for this work. We have a passion to prepare and foster justice-seeking citizens and raise awareness and organize collective activism to disrupt and dismantle inequalities. So in our short time together with you this evening, we want you to come along with us as we engage with you in the cross-white story, fascinating story. Consider the flexibility of the C3 framework because it's really non-prescriptive and we designed this for either virtual or face-to-face. And we want you to explore this history for justice framework that we built it on that exposes systematic structures of oppression, recognizes these unequal power relationships, but then to witness the power of collective activism. So as mentioned, this inquiry was designed using the children's literature book, January Sparrow by Patricia Polacco. It's a captivating and fascinating tale as it draws the reader into this historical yet somewhat fictionized version of the cross-white family story. Polacco does this amazing job of representing a really complicated subject in a way that's age appropriate to mid to upper elementary students. Although we would argue the book has over 100 pages, it definitely could be used in middle. I think it could even be arguable to use in high schools. The story helps the reader see and understand the injustice of slavery, but at the same time demonstrates the significance of the power of collective activism. However, we do want to caution readers against seeing this as a tale of the white savior that needs to come to save the helpless, poor victims of slavery. But instead, we really want you to focus on the power that a community can have when it rallies behind righting what is systematically wrong. So worth noting is that this takes place right here in Michigan, and actually it's not too far from OU. In fact, Erica, as we were creating this during COVID restrictions, was able to enact this inquiry with her 2 boys, which involved a family trip to Marshall. to walk the streets and read the historical markers, take it all in, the Crosswhite family and the incident that collectively brought change.
So I first encountered the tale of Adam Crosswhite during Michigan history college class, and I found the tale to be extremely riveting. A runaway slave and his family in Marshall, Michigan, and their former slave masters sent a team to men after them. And in the process of trying to capture them, hundreds of town folks, Black and white, rushed to their aid, fend off the men at great personal risk, and in doing so, allow and help the Crosswhites to reach lasting freedom in Canada. I believe it was such a powerful story of community, and it really deserves to be told in the classroom. When I first began finding ways to teach the Crosswhite story, I was ecstatic to find the amazing picture book written by author and illustrator Patricia Polacco called January Sparrow. In her story, it's a fictionalized telling of what has become known as the Crosswhite Incident of 1847. And in this story, Polacco invents a character named January Sparrow, who acts as a close personal friend, but who also narrates this story. While also working on this project and finding ways to bring it in the classroom, I found this amazing YouTube reading of the story by Miss Anthony. And I instantly fell in love with the way she's able to capture that Southern dialect. And I also found that I, as a Midwestern white woman, I lack that human experience to tell the story in the same beautiful way. And I really love the way she can say the story it's amazing. I'll let you just watch how she introduces the story.
A little background about our book. Miss Anthony is going to be reading the book the way it is written. It is in Southern dialect. And that just simply means it'll be some broken language. So you also have to keep in mind that the slaves, and this book is taking place in slavery and sharecropping era, the slaves inside of this story were not taught to read. So they spoke using the language that they had heard, not what they had learned. I want us to keep that in mind as we read. Just some nuggets to put in your Dropbox. You will hear words like slaves, right? You hear words like, auction, words like runaway, words like master. And I want you to keep all those small nuggets in your mind as we read, because we are going to jump right into it. January Sparrow is an AR read. It is level 4.0 and worth 1 point. A little background about our book.
Perfect. So the principal protagonist of our story is Sadie Crosswhite, the youngest daughter of Adam and Sarah Crosswhite, born into slavery in the mid-1800s. The story begins with the family making the harrowing decision to run towards freedom, as they have learned that Sadie's older brothers were set to be auctioned the following day by their slave owner, Francis Gilsner. The story goes on to depict the trials and tribulations that they face along the Underground Railroad from what is today Carroll County, Kentucky, until they reach the safe harbor of Marshall, Michigan. When they reach Marshall, they find refuge at the Underground Railroad station owned by Aunt Della. Here in the story, Sadie is woken in the morning by Aunt Della, not remembering falling asleep the night before. As the video plays, listen how the author describes the community of Marshall, Michigan.
Child, you in Michigan, a free state. There ain't no patty rollers here. You in Marshall. This town is part of the underground. We help runaways here. That's what we do. You can call me Della. Everybody does. She sang out as she eased Sadie back into her chair. And this here is Miss Nancy Reed, My neighbor, Miss Nancy, turned from the stove and spooned up eggs and grits for Sadie. Are we really safe here? Sadie asked in between bites. Safe as newborn lambs, Miss Reed exclaimed as she poured coffee for Adam and Sarah. Why, I heard of Marshall, Michigan, Adam said. It seemed he heard from an old friend, Moses Patterson. They'd met on one of Adam's trips to sell products for Master Gilsner. Moses used to live in Marshall. Adam was sure of it. Why, Moses told Adam that near 2,000 people lived in this town and that 60 of them were African American. Moses said all the colored folk in town knew each other, and when a stranger came through, they was watched to see if and they were spies from South looking for runaways. Even most white folks here in Marshall don't cotton to keeping slaves. They dead set against it, Nancy went on to say. Now that don't mean that you can trust all the white folks here on Delaware. But we'll show you the ones that you can. Oh, Daddy, Mama, can we stay here for a while? I'm so tired of running, Sadie pleaded. Canada is the only place we'll be safe. It's still against the law of the land to help runaway slaves, Adam said. Please, Daddy. I don't think I can walk another steps.
The Cross-White family did stay in Marshall, and they began a new life, a free life. For a few years, life was good in Marshall. They eventually became active members in the Underground Railroad, helping others to find freedom in Marshall. The Cross-Whites even welcomed a new daughter who was born free. Unfortunately for the Cross-Whites, Francis Gilsner never gave up his efforts to find them. Historical records are unclear as to how, but they did eventually learn their whereabouts. And he sent his son and a few men to Marshall to capture or attempt to capture them and bring them back to Kentucky. On January 26, 1847, at 4 o'clock in the morning, 4 men, David Gilsner, Francis Troutman, Willie Ford, and Jimmy Lee, who became known as the Kentucky Four, knocked on the Cross-White door. The events that transpired that night became known as the Cross-White Incident. Before we go further into the story, it's important to understand some of the main characters that played crucial roles in the event. First is Francis Troutman, nephew of Master Gilsner, part of the Kentucky Four. David Gilsner, eldest son to Master Gilsner. Moses Patterson, who was just mentioned in the book. His nickname was Auction Bell. He was a town crier. He was a very close friend of the Cross-Whites and an active member of the Underground Railroad. George Ingersoll, abolitionist lawyer and friend of the Cross-Whites. And Charles Gorham, abolitionist, mercantile owner, and employer of Adam Cross-White. All of these men played a key role into the incident of that night. As the Kentucky heroes will read in the story, as the Kentucky Four are attempting to capture the Cross-White family, Auction Bell was awakened by the commotion and ran to get help by ringing his bell up and down the streets. This led to a large crowd, black, white, young, and old, to surround the Cross-White home. Some historical records indicate that there was up to 100 people in the crowd. The crowd became outraged. They would not let the 4 men take them, which at the time they had the illegal authority to do. In the crowd, George Ingersoll and Charles Gorham came forward, pushed themselves between the Kentucky Four and the Cross-Whites. Listen to the incredible way the community stands up and defies the law and refuses to back down.
Troutman hoisted up his gun and crossed his arms defiantly outside the front door. In the house, Jimmy Lee lurched at Sarah Cross-White and lashed baby Francis by her hair. We're taking them. None of you can stop us. It's the law, Lee growled. Sarah screamed and fell back, still holding her baby. Lee pulled at both of them as Sarah skidded on the floorboards with her. Suddenly, the crowd parted and Gorham and Ingersoll came bursting through into the house. They wrestled the baby away from Lee. This child was born in a free state. She is a freeborn citizen of Marshall, and you cannot take her. Gorham shouted. He and Ingersoll forced the Kentucky Four out of the Crosswhites' kitchen and shoved them out the front. Then Gorham and Ingersoll stood with their backs to the door. The Crosswhites were safe inside. Gorham leaned into Francis Troutman's face. Like I said, you ain't taking these people anywhere. The crowd surrounded the four and leaned towards them, crowding in. Francis Troutman straightened his coat and tried to catch his composure. I want all of your names. He took a pad from his pocket, and I am taking these here names to your magistrate, demanding that he order your arrest, because you all are breaking the law, he thundered over the grumbling crowd. The crowd suddenly grew quiet for a long moment. Then a black man stepped forward. I is Plantamorse, he said. I'm James Smith, another said. I'm C.W. Hackett, still another said. And I am Charles Berger. I'm Willie Parker. One after another stepped up and wagged their heads, mocking Troutman. Then Ingersoll, Hurd, Easterly, and even Dr. Comstock. All white men gave their names. And I am Charles Gorham, spelled Gorham. Be sure you put it in the capital letters now, Gorham said, triumph. The crowd roared its approval and started to push at each of the Kentucky men. They jostled them about like bouncing balls, laughing when one lost his balance and fell.
So the crowd became even more enraged and demanded that the four men be taken to see the magistrate, Judge Hobart. To the surprise of the Kentucky Four, Judge Hobart did not take their side. Rather, he sent the men to jail for 2 days for disturbing the peace. This was just enough time to get the Crosswhites safely into Canada. Now,
Yeah, we're not going to play the rest of this
Yeah.
story. Yeah, it goes on. You got to. We'll leave it here that you can come back and watch it because it's just fascinating. But for time's sake, we are going to move on.
So this incident, like many others around the country, influenced the passage of the Compromise of 1850, which ultimately led to the Civil War. Now, for some, like the Crosswhites and many Marshall citizens, they truly believed that this was the incident that led to the Compromise of 1850. Where you see, Senator Henry Clay was a neighbor and friend of Francis Gilsner, who went around holding community meetings and telling anyone who would listen that telling about what the people of Marshall did to them. Because of this connection, many people believe that this was the true inspiration for writing the law, which of course is a very symptomatic and limited cause and effect correlation to the start of the Civil War.
So now that you've got a glimpse into this fascinating tale, we want to share with you how we brought this inquiry to life using the C3 inquiry arc. We were inspired by the work of Crowley and King, who guide our decisions in creating a critical social inquiry. So we intentionally worked on building students' critical consciousness so that they'd reflect from a critical standpoint. They would recognize these systematic injustices, analyze unequal power relationships that included the voice of the oppressed, and understand how important it is then to be involved in collective activism to alleviate injustice or unfair practices. And so over the next few minutes, what we want to do is share with you our inquiry. We use the 4-question template of the inquiry design model, and all of these templates are available for free on the C3 website. The IDM represents a blueprint of our inquiry, not a prescriptive step-by-step procedure about how to do this, but it's intentionally built for flexibility so that you could change it to fit your curriculum requirements, your preferences as a teacher, and also your students' needs. And we wrote this during the height of COVID shutdown. So we also wanted to make sure that if we were going to teach this face-to-face, or it's also online, so that we wanted to assure a multimodal accessibility. And so starting with the alignment with the standards, we'll walk you through the questions, the tasks, and the sources of this inquiry. It begins, of course, by staging the question, which with intention draws students into the compelling question of the inquiry, saying, are these people lawmakers or are they lawbreakers? And the story is told in 3 parts. Now, normally staging the question is short and sweet as you invite students in, but because this book is 100 pages long, we thought it's crucial to the inquiry. So we designed it to happen over 3 days. But once again, you could decide on how you wanted to have the story read. Erica did this by creating an amazing interactive read aloud Google Slides that's available for you here. She's got Loom readings. She's got some questions on Pear Deck for understanding. She embeds the reading by Miss Anthony. So it's just a fascinating, she did a really good job of making this an interactive Google Slides. So, yeah.
So the first supporting question, what is the most likely path for the Crosswhite family to get from Kentucky to Marshall, Michigan? In this part of the inquiry, as geographers, students explore the possible routes that the Crosswhite family may have taken on their journey along the Underground Railroad, which to history and time, we really don't know, but so that's why it's a possibility. We start by examining physical maps, which are a huge novelty to a lot of kids. Students start at the Gilsner plantation in Kentucky, and using the Brome and Company map from 1848 as a guide, they will follow one possible Underground Railroad route that the Crosswhites could have taken to Marshall. As they move up the map, the students will explore different facts and information about the many Underground Railroad stations that the Crosswhites may have visited. The map goes beyond Marshall through Detroit and into Canada to the final home that the Crosswhites had for many years. The next part, students will explore how the Crosswhites would have found their way along the Underground Railroad. First, they explore the legend of the slave quilts. And while there's much debate on the matter, it's a good way to introduce different ideas about how history is told. And finally, through the song of Following the Drinking Gourd, students will learn about spirituals and the power of song for those that were enslaved.
And so what we did was we, for the formative task, it's just a Google Doc where we first give an overview of what this supporting question could look like. And then everything that you would possibly need for this part of the journey is listed here. This is where we entered the traveling journey boxes, and it introduces the students to it. It gets them thinking about questions. What would people take with them if they were taking off from their homes? Then it invites them into it. It just gives you ideas on how to proceed through it, shows you the maps. You can interact on Jamboard if you want to. And then all of the sources are down. Here's some critical conversations to have at the end. And Erica put together just this wonderful, you can use the QR code, or you could use the URL, and everything that is needed for the maps and everything is on this Google Doc. It's just, and I was going to tell you at this end, but we are super excited because now that Erica found a long-term sub in the first week of May, we're actually going to be teaching this to fourth graders, and we can't wait to see it come alive off the page and see what students do with it. So we're excited about that.
Okay. The next supporting question we explore is, what was life like in Marshall, Michigan at this time? As you can see, in Patricia Polacco's illustrations are just gorgeous of what Marshall looked like at that time. And here we provide the students with a large map bank for photography, photographs, which were always, of course, after the fact, but books that encourage students to explore what life was like in Marshall at the time. Doing my research, I contacted the Marshall District Library, and I spoke with a librarian, Chelsea Johnson, who was kind enough to find and provide me with so many of the resources found in this image bank. And we're so excited to share it with you.
So on this one, we did it's almost the same kind of thing. We're on a Google Doc, we give you an overview, and we give suggestions on how to take the illustrations in the book and have kids analyze what was shown and illustrated there, talk about how are the illustrations, you know, how reliable are they, and to really be fascinated by what is portrayed there of the mixture of different people interacting together. And then, as Erica just mentioned, we've got this huge historical image bank that she put together with the descriptions of each of them. But also then if you click on here is the folder is each one of these things. So you can look at people, you can look at amazing buildings, and then try to find those same buildings in the book. We're pretty excited about seeing what kids will do with this, and what we're hoping then that they will create a visual representation of Marshall, maybe make a mural in the classroom. There's one particular find that Erica is super geeked about, and so I'm gonna let her talk to you about this. So this is an interactive map. As you can see, I can go up and down, but Erica, this is your baby, so.
Oh, I love this. This is, I think if I wasn't going into teaching, I'd go into cartography. I love a good map. So I found this at the Library of Congress, and it is of Marshall, Michigan, primarily Calhoun County, where Marshall's from. But the detail on this map is extraordinary. You can get down right to the streets and see what the houses were like at that time. And you can find the location to which the Marshalls lived and the characters in the story, which it's a real story. So only a few people of the story were actually fictionalized, but you can see where everything is. And I can't tell you how many hours I have spent over the course of this going through this map and just loving this map. It's so much fun to play with.
And it'll be fun to play with that with kids.
Mm-hmm.
Feel free to play around with that when you get the Google slide presentation here. So moving on, that's number 2.
Yeah. And then our next question that we asked our students is, what were the citizens of Marshall willing to risk to stand up for what was right? Through the use of the story, students will examine the laws and the rules regarding slavery before, during, and after the Civil War. And students will engage in more maps and videos and readings or mini quizzes just to check to make sure students are staying engaged. And it's a fun way to bring it all together for students.
And this was also intentional because we knew that at that time we thought we were going to be teaching it through not face-to-face, online. And so if you're not familiar with Satori, it's an interactive timeline. At the time we did this, it was free. Some of these things are starting to cost money, but this was free. But what happens here is that the students, it's very interactive. And so they do look at the larger picture of what's going on, slavery in Michigan, but then zooming out. And so these are all interactive things that they can do and interact with maps. There's little videos, there's little quizzes, as Erica just mentioned. But then they zoom out to look at, okay, how is what's happening in Michigan fit into the larger picture of the United States, and look at these laws, these systematic laws that are creating these situations that happened with the incident. And they look at resistance movements, the power of collective activism, before the Civil War, and then looking what happens at the incident and then after. And so there's just several things for them to interact with on here. And we also, because we know that sometimes teaching these units, if the teacher isn't familiar with the story, that you don't have the time to go looking for all of this stuff. So we actually also made a teacher's tutorial that would help build the background for teachers. And so that's what this one is. And it covers the same things, just a little bit more in depth, so that teachers can build their content knowledge.
And then our last supporting question, which really kind of brings it together with our primary question, is we ask our students, what would they be willing to risk when laws and rules are unjust? And this leads our students to the summative task, which is designed to be extremely flexible. We provide many ideas and things for teachers to do, but to allow the students to find that rule that could be unjust and ask the question, what would you do?
Yeah, and that would, depends on what age you would do this with too, and how it would fit into your standards. And if you notice, the supporting questions start with very factual, looking at maps, and they increase in complexity so that you lead them into thinking about, we're the citizens, lawmakers or lawbreakers, and what would we be willing to break laws? And so in looking at this, what we thought would be a good idea is to think about first we do a review of the supporting questions so we can think about where have we been in this journey, what have we done, what are we thinking, how do we propelling this forward? And we really want them to consider, like Erica said, what would we be willing to do? And so we have them investigate a current event. And that could be a local, it could be a national, it could be a state. And so we had just written down some things that came to mind when we were thinking about what was happening at the time that we wrote it. You'd have to, and that's where it's super flexible. You'd have to know your students, know what's going on. So they do that, and they would analyze it, thinking about, do they understand the facts of what's happening? Maybe thinking about it historically a little bit, investigating sources of the different perspectives, and then start to interpret what's the inequality that's happening here, and who's benefiting most from the laws, the rules, and the issue at hand, and who's not benefiting and what's causing the issue. And then perhaps looking at events that there has been action. Maybe there's been protests, maybe there's been people arguing or standing up, and investigate that. And then work together as a class to think about what do we want to investigate? Is it a rule in our school? Is it, and taking it larger, is it something that we can be involved in our communities and collectively act upon it? And so they would construct an argument, take a stand, and then develop some kind of action plan. And that, once again, is just totally open for how far you can go, what risk you want to take as a teacher. And so that's what we had for that. And so in thinking about growing in this practice, we want to continue to be co-learners, co-conspirators, and we want to join with others who are doing that work. And as I said, we are super excited. The first week in May, we're taking this into the classroom, and I'm sure it will morph and twist and turn, and kids will take us to places that we could not imagine, and we're very much looking forward to that. We hope that we can write about it and share that with you. Our ultimate goal is I'm hoping to write it and share it in the social studies and the young learner. Eric and I did write an article about how we wrote this unit together, and that's in the Great Lakes Journal, and we share a link with that in a minute. But I'm hoping that I will continue to bring omitted, silenced, or marginalized voices in the classroom. Right now, I'm working on a third grade unit on Asian American history, how to bring that into the classroom. Continue to connect that theory to practice, that desire, that passion for working against injustice and towards equality, and how do we bring that into the classroom, and continue to co-design. I have found out with my work with Molly, who's here, and with Erica, that together we are better, that this is meant to be collaborative, and it's just enjoyable work.
Yeah, and I'm reiterate all of that. Moving forward, I definitely want to work on co-designing with Linda and others to develop more justice-oriented social studies unit or units for the elementary classroom. And I want to explore more state history and local history because I know there are so many amazing, fascinating tales and fascinating people whose stories are generally underrepresented, especially in the elementary classroom. So I'm very excited to start working on those.
And so we do have, if you want to, I can put in the chat also, but there's the QRL code. Let me show you what that will take you to. I'll come back to it in a second. But it brings you to this folder, and we just placed in here a few articles that we were inspired by. I mentioned the Critical Inquiry by Crowley and King. That's a short read, but very powerful about going beyond just facts to really digging into inequality. There's another article that was in Social Studies in the Young Learner about January Sparrow. And then this is the article that Eric and I wrote together. And then we're giving you access to the template that has all the links are live. And I thought in here, Erica, we had the Google slide presentation, but I don't see it at this point, but I can put it
We'll
in.
make sure to add it in shortly.
Yeah. And so let me put in the chat the address.
I just did.
Oh, great. Okay,
Yep.
perfect. And then we would just also wanted to open it up. We got a few minutes if anybody has any questions, or we would love, even some comments on how we could make it better. We're open for any and all suggestions. We are collaborators for sure.
So I've been sitting on the edge of my seat. I put the book on for my granddaughter, and she sat there and started watching as it was being read. And then she went back to what she knows. But I want to just say thank you. Seriously, thank you. It makes my heart smile to see people who are looking outside of their own comfort level and what they know, and that is very appreciative. And I'm saying this on a recorded thing, so I probably shouldn't, but it really, you just don't know that even in a district that's majority Black, you're not seeing some of what you're doing, and that is awesome. I really do appreciate it. I would just also say one of the things that brought my students a lot of joy was also hearing about other people during that time who are going through some of the same things. So we read Copper Sun, and it showed like a really good mix of immigrants and what they had to go through as indentured servants. And it showed the Native Americans and what they were going through all at the same time. It's by Sharon Draper. It's a great book. And it does a really good job of helping you see a bigger picture during this period of slavery, because slavery was about money. And so it really opened up a lot of my students' understanding, and showed them just how important where we live also was during the time. And I don't want to take up all the time, but yeah, this has brought me so much Black girl joy. You just do not.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you
that.
so much. And I wrote
will.
down that book. I'm going to go and check that one out right away.
And then the other one that's about the case from, and then I'm done, I promise. The one that's a very similar case is the Blackburns, Lucy and Thornton Blackburn. And I can't think of the name of the book off the top of my head, but it's about, they had a very similar story in Wayne County. We're in Detroit. So if you've been to Detroit and you've been to, if you've been by the Joe Louis, there's a library there that used to be the Wayne County Jail. That Wayne County Jail is where the Blackburns were held, and women dressed up and pretended to be her so that they could escape to Canada. And Canada now, that's where the law came in that Canada would not release enslaved African Americans or Africans back to the United States. So I'm done. I'm so excited.
I love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Any questions, comments? We really do thank you for coming. It's a long Wednesday, and so we appreciate that. We had a great time writing it. We did it all through Zoom. In fact, we had she had been in my class that was on Zoom, and we wrote this on Zoom. And last summer we finally met each other. We had been
For the first time.
like in person,
Face to face.
like, you know, like we've been working, like we know each other really well, but we had never seen each other.
I'm actually just curious, how long do you think this took you total to put together?
Well, it took us quite a while because we did it in small increments, and
Yeah.
it was a learning experience for both of us. Erica
Yes.
knew nothing about the C3 framework, and it became a teaching thing too, that I was teaching how to use the C3 framework. I don't know, Erica, what do you say? It took us
I
long
would
time.
say the base information took a few solid good weeks to put together. It was dedicated time to put together. But I think it's well worth it. That because it's there, I know it can springboard. And now that I've done it once, I know where to go and look. And I think that was the hardest thing. It was that learning curve. I didn't know where to go and look. And now I feel very comfortable navigating different websites to gather that information. I'm more comfortable with the technology of how to lay it out and put it together. And I'm also more comfortable with like saying, oh, let me call the local library. That librarian probably has everything I need or knows where to get it. And I'm not taking hours doing my own thing. And they're so helpful. So it was a big learning, but I love it. And I can't wait to do more.
And we learned so much from each other. I learned a lot of her love for history and just digging in. I mean, she calls me geeking about this map, you know, I'm just like, so I learned a lot from her, to search for that. And then so it was a mutual thing. Someone asked about how long we think it's going to take. We're going to try to do it in a week, an hour a day, but we are reading the book the week before. So because the book is crucial to the story and fascinating. So the book will be read in 3 different class periods, and then we're hoping that each supporting question we can dig in and have an hour for each. And
I think that's part of making it flexible too, is just like any classroom, there's going to be a day where we are going to get through quickly and move forward. And I'm anticipating there's going to be a day where we might have to roll something over to the next block.
And I can't be more excited to be with 4th graders. It's been a few years since I've been with 4th graders. I taught middle school my last 18 years. So I started in 4th grade years ago. So I'm geeked to be with 4th graders and to be co-teaching with Erica. So any other questions before I guess we're not going to kick out quite yet, but. Oh, good.
Can I say one more thing? I'm sorry.
No,
I'm one of those people who say one more thing. I have one more thing. So I dropped the name of the author of the book. I think it's something about Gloryland, but if you put her name in, you should find it, about the Blackburns. And then the other thing I was going to say to Erica, you have access free from Isri, and you can create your own story maps, any of that stuff. Yep. So you can just sign up Isri.org, I think it is. And it's an awesome tool to have.
Wonderful. I'm writing all of that down. Thank you so much.
How do you spell that, Isri? How do you spell that, Marsha? Okay, E, all right. This is good.
And I'm not sure if Dr. Chi is still, it's XIE, if he's still at Eastern, but he is like the geospatial guru.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See, this is great. The more, the better. Well, we do want to thank all of you for coming, and we'll make sure that the Google Slides also get put into that folder. But thank you. And
yes, thank you so much.
Oh, I'm going to quick grab that too.
Thank you. I'm definitely grabbing that.
Yeah.
All the stuff.
Need more pre-service teachers with willing to do this kind of work. We're working on it. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we're gonna call it a night. Enjoy. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both.